Welcome to LinkedIn Live and a special edition of the Power Lunch. I'm Rhett Power, your host. And for the next couple of weeks, instead of doing my regular program, I wanted to have a special series called Quarantine Conversations, because I'm in quarantine and you probably are too. And the point of that is that I want to have great guests. I want to be able to talk about the issues that we're all facing. We're in this unprecedented time. Things are crazy and weird, and there's a lot of anxiety. And so the point of this sort of program is to sit down and have conversations with experts and people who are going through it and leaders who are experiencing the same things we're talking about. And hopefully these conversations help you get through some of the leadership challenges that you're now facing. Today, we're talking about leadership in crisis. That's a great starting point since that's where we are. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about leadership and resilience and how you can be a resilient leader. But today, I've got some great guests. I'm going to introduce those guys in a minute. This is an interactive program, so please do ask your questions. If we don't get to them live on air, we will certainly get to them after the program. You can ask your questions on Twitter. You can ask your questions on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, of course. And we'll monitor those feeds during the show and after and get answers to your questions, because that's another reason why we're doing this, is so that we get to answer your questions. Now, I also want to thank Marshall Goldsmith and helping us bring these conversations and all these people together, because everybody in this group here are in the Marshall Goldsmith 100, which is an amazing group of leaders that I learn from every day, and call many of them good friends now. And so I want to introduce our panel. I've got Jennifer McCollum. She is CEO of Linkage, Inc., a Boston-based leadership development company that works to accelerate purposeful leaders, advance women leaders, and create inclusive cultures. I've got Charlene Li. She is the author of the New York Times bestseller, Open Leadership, and co-author of the critically acclaimed book, Groundswell. And I've got Henna Inam. She is the CEO of Transformational Leadership, Inc., and she is author of Wired for Authenticity. And guys, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
Well, I think we're just in these really strange times, and I wanted to ask you guys, can you really plan for something like this? I know you can plan for change, and you can plan for maybe even a disaster. I remember when I had a business, a manufacturing company, we lived in a hurricane area, and so we did have sort of a hurricane plan, a disaster plan. But can you really plan for something as monumental as this? And I'll start with Charlene, since you're at the top of my screen here.
Okay. I don't know so much you can plan. You can put all the contingency and disaster plans in place. I think of it more as preparation, preparing your team, preparing your strategy for contingencies like this. Because it could be anything from this huge pandemic. It could be something closer in, like the passing away of one of your leaders. And whatever it is that is being thrown at you, you want to have the confidence that your team can persevere and move forward.
What do you think, Jennifer? Would you add anything to that?
Yeah, there was nothing in our wildest 3-year plan that looked like pandemic coronavirus. There was the economic decline. And so the thing I would say is, it's not that you can plan for the event. You can put the processes and structures in place so that you can really operate as a really highly functioning team in the midst of, in this case, the virus. So we did have some processes in place that allowed us to see early indications of it even a month ago, and to start planning, which put us in a slightly better position. But I think the acceleration of the crisis that we're seeing now would have been very difficult to plan for.
Yeah. Henna, what do you think?
So I would agree with Charlene and Jennifer. I don't think you plan for the event, but I think you can plan as a leader to be resilient, and you can plan as a team to come together with great resilience and collaboration. And I think there are, I think as hard as this pandemic, this disruption is for all of us, I also think that it's a wonderful opportunity for leaders to step up into extraordinary leadership, and for all of us to learn how to appreciate the things we have and take care of our loved ones, and in general learn how to shift our mindset about how to just be more agile in ambiguity and more creative in chaos.
Do you guys think this is an opportunity? I mean, an opportunity for someone to really gain the trust of their team and show that they, what do you think about that? Is this an opportunity for leaders? Henna,
I think it's if you don't mind, I'll start. I think it's a huge opportunity. Whenever there's a disruption or a crisis, there becomes a vacuum of certainty, of vision, of purpose. And so people really need that. And leaders are born in times like this, and leaders step forward to lead. And so I think every time there's a disruption, there's an opportunity. So you can decide whether you're going to be struck down by that, frozen by it, stuck with it, or are you going to say, look, I have no idea, but we've got to take advantage of this, and there's a need, both inside my team and externally. We're going to rise to that challenge and meet that need, face on with a lot of courage. I think courage is when you don't know what the outcome is and you still step forward.
That's very true. That's profound. I like that very much.
And just to build on that, I actually think it's an opportunity, but I think it's really difficult. And leaders have to be self-aware enough to realize what they as individuals need moment to moment, day to day, at the same time being, emotionally present and resilient enough to understand what their teams and what their organization needs. And I think it's a lot to ask of leaders day to day. It's an enormous amount to ask of leaders in a crisis like this. And I think for those leaders, to Charlene's point, who will be born or really shine in moments like this, it's because they are able to be self-reflective and self-aware enough to know what both they need as well as their organizations.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah, and I'll just jump in. I saw a really beautiful blog post by Brandon Stanton, who created the Humans of New York.
Right.
And in his blog post, he said, this is the world war of our generation. And it's the war that it's us, the human race, fighting against a virus. And what I loved about his framing of it is it's a wonderful opportunity for us to decide, each individually as well as collectively as a human race, how we're going to show up as leaders. Because leadership is a mindset. It's not a position in a hierarchy. It's about how you choose to be an influencer in a situation to create a positive impact for the greater good. And so his thought and framing of it is, this is a wonderful opportunity for each of us to recognize who we are and create who we can be in these times of crisis. And I guess that would be a challenge, I think, for each one of us to figure out and define who we want to be as a leader. What a great opportunity for us to show up as forces of good.
Yeah, indeed. And that's actually the great segue into my next question. What traits do you think our people, our teams and our organizations need? What do they need from us? What do they need to see in us right now?
Can I jump in? Because
Please do, yes.
I just saw on LinkedIn that there's a new course on psychological safety by Amy Edmondson. And, these are times of threat, right? So the human psychology gets threatened by this kind of disruptive change, because we're not just dealing with issues around our health and the health of our loved ones. We're also dealing with the impending recession and the aftermath. And we can't know what we don't know. We don't know when this will end. And that raises threat level for each of us as human beings, as leaders, for people in our organizations. And so psychological safety and what we each can do first to manage our own state of being. And I'm a big proponent of mindfulness and really becoming present in each moment, where I'm at, how threatened do I feel, or how calm do I feel? So from that place, kind of really calming ourselves down, And then the second piece is how can we reach out to really take care of and make sure that our people across our ecosystem, our employees, our customers, our suppliers, everybody that we touch, our neighbors, our family members, certainly feel psychologically safe, because that is the basic kind of in the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Other than toilet paper, we know toilet paper is really important for people, apparently. But feeling psychologically safe is such an important driver for people.
So, Rhett, you made an interesting, what you said, what are the traits of leaders at this time? And I separate with how as leaders do we need to be, which I would call traits, and what do we need to do, which I would call skills or practices.
That's a great way to break that down. Yeah.
So maybe just landing on traits for a moment, because I do think psychological safety is critical. But there's also how can we be more calm, more positive, more present than ever before, because those around us are taking cues to our leaders. However you define leaders, it could be our government and state leaders, it could be the leaders in our work. But if, it's one of the things I'm really trying hard to focus on is in every meeting, in every conversation, can I be as calm, as positive, as present, because my teams are taking those cues, and it's not easy.
No. And having people look at you for the answers when you don't have them is unnerving in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Well, that gets to the next point, which again, Charlene, jump in on the how can we be, but in the terms of what do we need to do, I'd love to talk about that, because then it's not just us, the leader, it's how can we engage everybody.
Yeah, we're going to get to that, definitely. That's really important.
I just would add one more thing about the B, and that is that self-awareness that both Henna and Jennifer were talking about, because you will not feel calm, you will not feel positive. And I know I've definitely not been present over the past 2 weeks at times. And I have found, this is kind of going to do, but this is not so much the external, how we're going to talk about that in a second, like how do you show up for your team and for everybody else. But the one thing that I have found to be so helpful is to have your personal advisory board, your network, the people that you can call in and help you through these tough places, help you be more self-aware, call you on your inaction, and give you the hard medicine that nobody else is going to do. I needed a slap in the face this past week, like wake up out of this, and I got a really hard slap from my personal board. And they're like, this is not you. I'm a normally really upbeat and positive person. And for them to turn my attention out of me and over to the people who I serve was invaluable.
Yeah, I think we all need that slap sometimes. What, how do you, let's get into the how you show up. What is, there's an incredible amount of opportunity right now, and a lot of companies are going to thrive, and they're going to innovate, and they're going to pivot, and they're going to use this as a time for great innovation. And we're going to see, we were talking about in the last call, we're going to see some amazing books of innovation that came out of this. We're going to see some amazing books about how companies pivoted in this time, right? But the harsh reality is a lot of companies are going to get buried here, and a lot of companies are going to really suffer. How do you, and because everything is changing so fast, how do you give people confidence? How do you come in and say, this is what we're doing today, this is how we're looking at things today? How do you give people confidence that you have a handle on it when things are moving so fast? And is that the right way to look at it? Maybe that's not the right way to phrase it, but I guess you know what I'm saying. Is how do you communicate with people on a daily basis? How do you do that and give them confidence that you have some control?
So one of the things we talk about in our Linkage Purposeful Leadership Framework, which is the 5 commitments that, in the best of times, leaders are practicing those commitments. And the first one is inspire. And inspire is about How do you provide hope and inspiration for a future? And normally we define that future as a 3 years out, or maybe even 1 year out.
Right.
How do you actually do that when things are changing within hours? And so one of the things we're trying to do is, what does inspire look like on a much more minute time frame? So it could be, what does hope and inspiration for the future look like this week or today or for this meeting? And we don't have all the answers, but we have the answers in the plan for today. And so in every gathering, we're looking at very small increments of this week, which could lead to next month, and then things will change again. But we've really stopped talking about the 3-year business plan or the 1-year operating plan, because you can't inspire on that level when there's so much uncertainty.
Right.
I would say, Rhett, I want to come back to what Jennifer was saying. I think in these times, it's not so much about the plan. I think it's about the purpose, because purpose actually is not time bound, right? And while things are changing very rapidly, you can still stand in purpose. And so for me, my personal purpose is to help create transformational leaders that make the world better for all. And in today's context, that could mean something very different than, in 3 years from now. But as long as I'm standing in my purpose, we had a lovely, really great coming together this weekend of a Zoom call that actually Charlene joined us on, where we brought together some of my community, and we just had a talk to say, how is everybody doing? What does this disruption mean? What are some of the biggest challenges for you? And how can we support each other? And that was the conversation. And it was a beautiful conversation, because everybody got in touch with what they were feeling, and then got the benefit of a community of like-minded people who wanted to be a force for good. And so as I've been reflecting personally about my purpose and being purposeful in these times, I'm thinking about, starting to do even a 5-minute video every day around, a daily dose of inspiration for people, because so many people are going to be at home and quarantined. And so this is a great petri dish for creating new things if you're grounded in purpose.
That is brilliant, by the way. Thank you. That is brilliant.
Yeah, one of the things I've been really focused on is, how do organizations disrupt themselves? How do they find these new opportunities when things are chaotic, when their business is down, when every customer seems to be turning their back on you? And the one thing I have always found with these disruptive organizations, they focus on the future customer. They think about where that new customer is going to come from, where are those growth opportunities. And I think what we're finding is that the companies who are saying, like, this is a great opportunity out there, is because there are so many problems to be solved. If people have a problem, they want to be able to solve them. They will pay you good money to solve them. And so what I'm finding with leaders, they realize they're not in control. You had a really good question about, how do you feel like you're being more in control? I think the first part is realizing that you weren't in control in the first place. That's a fallacy.
That's hard for a control freak. That's hard.
Yeah. And it's something I wrote about 10 years ago in my book, Open Leadership. And it's the idea of giving up control to be in command. And what you are in command of what actions you will take, how you will think. And so the biggest ability that you have right now is, if you have this talent and these resources, these assets, where are you going to point them? And you don't have to have the answers. You're better off having that transparency and that openness, and having the confidence to say, I don't know what the answer is, but I have a direction. We have a vision, we have a purpose. We think this is where the opportunities lie. Let's go get it. And that can be incredibly motivating for the team to give them that direction, versus putting your head down going, we just need to close down and come in, versus expanding and going out.
Do you think this is an okay time to be vulnerable for your team or with your team?
I don't think there's a time when it's not okay to be not vulnerable. I think that the best, the one thing that people say over and over again, what they want their leaders to be, is honest, fair, human, vulnerability is core to them. And I think in many ways, what this time is going to do is going to hopefully provide a new form of leadership that becomes much more transparent, much more flexible, creates agility and agency in people, because you can't manage by walking around anymore because there's nobody to walk around with. So you need to have that transparency in many ways to create that accountability. It's a very new type of relationship, and our leaders are ill prepared today to be able to have this new type of relationship created by the distance and the chaos.
Yeah.
Well, and also say in moments like this, when there is no right answer, to your point, and we actually have to look internally to figure out, how do we engage the entire community into the future? If you're not honest and truth-telling and open and vulnerable, it's really hard to do that. So I think I think it was you, Charlene, talking about the command and control structure is completely ineffective. If we had someone on our leadership meeting today, we bring 18 people together now multiple times a week as we're problem solving and looking at innovation and opportunity. She said, we need to bring the entire staff together for 5 and 10 minutes at a time. And so the conversation shifted to, what if the leaders don't have the answers, but we have a direction? How do you engage the totality of the staff who really want to help? And so that's fostering it gives them a sense of purpose to support the company and themselves during this time. So it's really disrupting. How do you engage? How do you innovate? How do you communicate? And we're testing and trying things that aren't necessarily comfortable or the way we've led for the last couple centuries.
Yeah. Yeah. Is this a time, well, how do you, we're going to be, rephrase this question. There's going to be a lot of pain. So how do you give bad news? Because that's a reality that a lot of people are going to be facing. And so how do you deliver that in times like this? Because this is the worst time. I mean, it's bad enough to have to deliver layoffs and changes and furloughs and all the things that we have to end up doing. How do you deliver that? And when do you do it? I mean, it doesn't seem like a good time to do it now. There's never is, but this is an absolutely awful time to do it.
Well, I will jump in on that, Rhett, because I think from my perspective, the only way you can deliver bad news is with an open heart. When you put yourself in the context of the person receiving the news, and also have compassion for them, but also have compassion for yourself, because it's hard to deliver bad news. And I think so many of us try to rush through it, like, this is sort of like getting your tooth pulled. Let's get it done as soon as you can, and then we don't do it with grace. And so I think it's really important, back to the conversation we were having earlier about mindfulness, to really get yourself in a place of greater compassion for you and the person that you're delivering the news to, and be able to share, here's what you're feeling, that perhaps you're sad at having to deliver the news to them, and have a human-to-human conversation. And that's where the whole, your question around vulnerability really comes through, about really connecting with our humanity.
Yeah, I think that's important. That's very good.
And to Charlene's point around your personal board, if you're not used to delivering that kind of news, please practice with someone that you trust so that they can give you that kind of feedback. Because you're right, as leaders, we are, I've already had to deliver bad news around millions of dollars of cost cuts, the challenges that we're facing as a business. And I've been testing out that language and communication with people and my leadership team to say, like, are we doing this right? Could we be doing it with more grace and with more compassion, to Henna's words, which I think are beautiful words.
Yeah, I've done this in the past I've done this in the past very badly and poorly. And the times that I've done it is when Jennifer says, I pulled into myself. I wouldn't be vulnerable. I wouldn't open up to say to people. I was just so ashamed that we had gotten into that situation. And my natural instinct was just to pull in And what I should have done, what I've done in the past, was to reach out and to talk to people about how I was feeling about this. Because you cannot go and talk to your team unless you're feeling 100% confident that this is the right thing to do. And you're conveying that, because they will seek off of that energy of how you approach that. So if you're walking in shameful, embarrassed, just incredibly debilitated by that, it's not going to help anybody. So this is something we have to do. And the best advice I can give is do it as quickly and as cleanly as you can, with a tremendous amount of empathy for people. Open up your network, ask people to open up their networks too, and help each other through this time. But I think what people expect is that you give them that honest answer, like what is going on. And very importantly is how you continue and salvage a very hurt team that has just seen valued colleagues walk out the door. How are you going to help them and together pick up the pieces and move forward? Because we sometimes so focus on delivering the bad news. How are we going to bring the team together now to move forward into this new journey we have to go on together? So building up those bonds, creating that new normal is really hard to do when everyone is hurting. But you have to be able to do that.
Yeah, that's very true. Do we expect the same amount of productivity now out of people? I mean, what do you guys think about that? I know, Jennifer, you've got a team that works remotely now and has been doing that for a long time. But with all these new changes, I mean, how do we look at productivity now? What do you think how is that going to change how we view people's work?
So I think, Rhett, for me, I think we need to redefine productivity and what productivity is for these times.
Okay.
Most people in the industrial age think of productivity as how many widgets, got done or produced. Mm-hmm. Other people think of productivity as what was the outcome? Did we make the sales numbers or whatever? Did we meet our goals? And I think in this time of crisis where everything is changing, I think the first measure of productivity is, in my view, what relationships did we create and strengthen and hold on to? Because we know that at the end of all this, there will be an end. We don't know exactly when it is, right, but that those relationships will serve us because people remember, particularly in crisis when they are under threat, people remember who it is that they could count on, what trust was built and what trust was destroyed. So I in my view, productivity is about trust more than ever in this time.
Okay. Thank you.
I love that. I also feel like setting a high expectation of productivity, even though it's a crazy environment, is good because it helps people maybe stay out of fear as much. So what I'm trying to do is actually keep as many regularly scheduled structures that we have, even though we're all having to dial in, create multiple work streams, because people don't want to sit at home with nothing to do, with sales slowing and client delivery slowing and projects stalling. They want to feel like they're contributing. And so, and this may change, right? It may change week to week. This is kind of week one of everybody working from home under this, really renewed crisis type feeling with everything shutting down. We're still at this point where, people are really engaged as long as they can stay out of the fear. My sense is across the course of the next few weeks, if that starts to die down, then to Henna's point, we're going to have to dramatically redefine what productivity looks like, but it may be a week to week and day to day thing.
Right.
I think of productivity as the wrong metric because productivity assumes that you had your goals and KPIs from before and they're the same today. I think you need to take a fundamental step back and say, what are our goals? What are the KPIs? How are we going to measure success? What does good look like? And to Jennifer's point, we may have to adjust those on a day-to-day basis. But this is when the leader needs to be extremely clear. What are our goals? What do we focus our efforts on? And the traditional productivity, again, to Henna's point, it may just be we stay connected as a team. That's our number one goal right now. We want to feel and develop this new culture of what it means to be remotely working. It's new for each other. We're going to bring each other into this new space, be mentoring, whatever it is, have our Zoom happy hours, right? So whatever it is, but what is the job to be done now? And it's probably not the existing job. And as customers and business falls away, how are we going to focus our efforts not so much on production, but it may be around innovation and business development? So I think as leaders, to be able to have clarity, provide that road forward for people, that again, vision and purpose, those ideas of what we are working on is the key metric here. And then we give each other a little bit of a break to say, these are new metrics, let's figure this out together. So don't feel like it's a failure if you haven't gotten things done. We're going to have to figure out what does this new level of productivity and achievement actually look like into this new normal.
No, I think that's a great way to look at it, and very smart too. Are there any tips? I know we all coach remote teams and people. Are there any tips for managing this? Because, I mean, how do you bring everybody together? What are some concrete tips to stay in communication? And I mean, do you bring people together in groups or town halls, or do you take a team approach where you talk to a small team here and a small team there? What do we do?
So one of the things we're doing is I'm bringing the leadership team together multiple times a week and trying to empower them to turn and then engage their teams. But I have been getting some requests to bring the entire company together. So one of the things we're innovating internally, and I'm struggling with a little bit because, again, information is coming in bits and pieces, and what can I communicate before we have really clear plans versus can't we just all come together and connect, which is a good outcome in and of itself. So we're trying to manage the business outcomes, the employee outcomes, the personal morale and, kind of survival instinct outcomes, all at the same time. And I think the answer for us anyway right now, Rhett, is yes. We have to find ways to connect at the individual level, at the team level, at the organizational level. And most important for me right now is that every single employee feels a sense of purpose, a sense of contribution, a sense of engagement, because they're not all in every meeting. They don't have the same vantage point that I do, but I still want them to be engaged and feeling like their contributions matter, which they do.
And then that's doubly hard, I think, in this environment, isn't it? Because, I mean, if you've got people if you haven't done a great job with people in an office, it's going to be awfully hard when they're remote. So, I'm sorry, I know other people wanted to answer that.
Yeah, I wanted to say, I have this theory, this concept of communicating in 3D, meaning we're used to communicating one way, typically face-to-face, maybe by email, maybe through one other channel, meetings. And what we have to get really good as a leader is realize that communications are not multimodal. You're going to have, if you're using a collaboration platform, and I highly encourage it, like Slack, communicating to there constantly, using daily stand-ups and weekly meetings for different purposes, getting rid of meetings and working in an asynchronous way, but you have a certain level of truth that's in writing so everybody can see what is actually being done, that level of transparency. What doesn't work is taking your existing, your previous way of working and communicating and just assuming that that's going to work the same way in this new space. It doesn't. And so I think in many ways, making sure that you are communicating, gathering the information so that people can see it, have great transparency, but also be really, really 100% clear on what decisions are being made, and then communicate that through every single possible channel that somebody could have, so you have this great alignment around where you have decided to move forward. So it's not easy. There's lots of little techniques along the way that people will have to figure out. Just like Jennifer is saying, every organization may do this differently, but it's that commitment as a leader. Put yourself as if you were working remotely. What information would you want to have? How would you want to be communicated to? Realizing that I can't always make it to every meeting. I got kids over there. I've got to go get groceries, whatever it is.
Right.
So how are we going to really?
Charlene, I actually, this is, and then Henna, you please have the last word on this, but you just hit me because this morning we realized as a leadership team that we were housing all kinds of documents on our collaboration platform, but it was limited to the 18 leaders, and the other 60 employees didn't have access. And I asked the question, what is in these documents that the rest of the staff can't see? I mean, it is basically our plan, our innovation, our thinking, it's all transparent. You know, short of some very confidential HR information, there's nothing that was secret. So we made a decision in that meeting, we're opening it up to the entire firm so they can see what's happening and they can contribute to it on our platform. So, sorry, Henna, go ahead.
Yeah, what I was going to share is two things. I think first is in threat, our need from a neuroscience perspective, our need for relating to one another actually goes up significantly. So, you know, however we're communicating with one another, I think we need to increase and double and triple exponentially the frequency of communication, because our need for information and control is so high under threat. Right. And when somebody feels left out of the information cloud, if you will, then it creates a higher level of lack of control for them. And so they're already feeling out of control, and now they're feeling out of the loop. And so, Jennifer, I think that's fantastic what you and your team decided to do. The second piece I want to share with you is about what the neuroscience says about the content of what you want to communicate. So many of us that are hard driving leaders, and particularly under a threat scenario, are seeing our sales numbers slip away or client call, projects going down. Might want to double up on, okay, well, here are our goals, team, let's go get the goals. And there's actually some great research by Professor Richard Boyatzis, which talks about what actually makes people more agile to change versus more fixed. And it goes back to our neuroscience, where we have a analytical or task-focused network in our brain, and we have an empathic network in our brain, and it acts as a seesaw. So the more you're focused on the tasks or goals, the less you're focused on the empathic network, which is the connected network, which is also, by the way, a more ethical network in the brain. So, and this is a network that is more open to change. So what we communicate in these times is more, how are we taking care of people? How often are we connecting to people? How do we make sure that they first and foremost feel safe? Even if we are telling them, look, I don't know the answer to this, but when I know, I will let you know. But in the meantime, here's the focus area for today. I think that helps people feel a sense of connection and safety, and that helps them change more rapidly and be more agile than if we start to talk to them about, like, here are the goals, let's go get them.
Yeah. I like that, breaking it down to today, right? I think that's what we can sort of get our heads around right now. We have two more questions. The first is, excuse me, do we treat our customers the same as we treat our employees in our teams? I mean, because we have to think about it. I mean, they're struggling too, right? And so how do we look at our customers right now?
If I can just jump in, Rhett, on the news this morning, I think it was the news, I was hearing something that was fascinating to me. I think that in times of crisis, when we're tempted to actually narrow our focus, because we're sort of trying to figure out, here's what I can control, and so let me narrow to what I can control, the right thing to do is actually widen your focus. Because I heard this morning on the news about how food companies are actually coming together. Traditionally, they are competitors with one another in the same, food grocery business, but they're actually coming together to collaborate to create a more stable supply chain of food for all of us. And so I think back to purpose and what you're here for, and creating trust, and how you can be a force for good. I think the more we can widen our eyes and look up to say, who are all the people in our ecosystem that we can influence or have a positive impact on, and how can we collaborate with them to be a force for good? I think that's the way to go.
I agree.
I think it's important for us to see the interconnectivity of all of those things. So for our business, we don't survive without our clients. We also don't survive without our supply chain. And so with this, and we certainly don't survive with our employees. So, I mean, and I'm sure there are other groups as well, like community and broaden, but just those three, how they interact or interrelate, it has become really critical. So we've got to find ways not only to see the interconnected tissue, but also to support each other. And I'll give you a really specific example. Almost 100% of any live client deliveries, and we're in the leadership business, are being postponed, not canceled, but postponed.
Right.
If they're postponed 6 months, we can absolutely honor and be flexible, and yet we can't, if every single client postpones, we can give them flexibility with the contracts, but we also in return have to figure out how can we ensure we're a sustainable business in those 6 months when they want us. And so the conversations we're having now, and we're just starting, we're talking to every client, we're talking to our supply chain to understand what are your concerns, what are you doing, how can we help? Conversely, how can you help us? Because if any of the links in the chain break, someone's not going to be around 6 months from now, maybe multiple ones of us, right?
Right. What do you think, Charlene?
The Business Roundtable came out this past August that said that the purpose of an organization is no longer just to raise the shareholder value. It's also serving these other stakeholders of customers, employees, supply chain, suppliers, and your community. And when I saw that, it struck me that everything we've known about business and leadership is wrong. That the things that we use to account for value and purpose just got completely thrown out the window. And what this crisis is really, and into your question, it's really making us step back and say, how do we think strategically about this? How do we think about our profits, our revenues in the context of a much larger group of stakeholders? And so I think in many ways, it's not do I choose this or that? Do I choose my profits or my customers? Again, to Jennifer's point, having this really transparent and very open discussion about saying, we need to be around, we also need to help our community, we need to support our employees, all of this need to be held in balance. The problem is we don't have very many tools to do that. We don't have best practices on how to do that. And we are literally making this up as we go along. But I keep going back to, if you focus on that long term, if you think about what is going to get you there, it's never just focusing on one of those things.
Yeah, no, very good points. Is this a time to hire a coach? Because it seems to me, this is the time when you really talk to somebody, and this is a time when you probably feel the most alone because you're making tough decisions. And so is this a good time to if you've sort of put off getting a coach, is this not a good time to talk to somebody and build your network and really work on your network? Because I mean, if any time in my memory, I mean, I've never experienced anything like this. This is the time to talk to somebody and get advice and feedback and ideas of what other people are doing.
I think it's a great time. I mean, whenever you are running through these issues, have issues around and concerns, it's always a great time to get help. It could be a coach, it could be joining a peer-based circle, it could be getting some other people that you know and you trust, and that's the key thing, together. And I know from a coaching perspective, from my perspective as a coach and an advisor, it's so tempting to have to put up my shingle and say, okay, because my other revenues have gone away, how can I get more business in? And I've had to just put that aside, because the most important thing right now is to create as much confidence and stability and calm in people. And if I do that effectively without necessarily an expectation that I'm going to get paid for it in the ways that I can, I know it's going to come back. I absolutely have confidence that it's going to come back to me. And so I think in many ways for leaders who need that advice, there are so many places to find it. And I think people will want to do that if you can get a coach who has that availability. And the hard part about getting a coach is finding the right coach, I think.
Yeah.
And if you don't even know where it is, the time lag that's going to take. So I would say get a coach, but don't only get a coach. Go out and get as much advice, try a lot of different things, and figure out very quickly what's going to work for you.
Yeah, I think, Jennifer, you were saying it earlier. I mean, some of these things you have to practice saying, right? Some of this, you want to make sure that your message isn't tone deaf. And so, I mean, what do you guys think about getting help? I mean, at this point.
I think it's always a good time to get help. I think now, with everything moving so quickly, it's probably, ideally you would have had one before that you're dialing up. Finding one, to Charlene's point, is not easy, but it's absolutely not impossible. I think most importantly is we as individuals, certainly as we as leaders, we can't do this on our own. We need someone to share our struggles, our hopes, our fears, and to provide a mirror back to us to help us with our own self-awareness during this really difficult time day to day. I don't know how else to do that without having someone. Is it your personal advisory board? Is it your trusted confidant, or is it a formal coach?
Yeah, and if you haven't worked on any of that, audience, those are some things that you need to work on. A personal advisory board is clutch, actually. But
I will just jump in, Rhett, and say I had this really amazing conversation yesterday morning with the CEO of a company whose board I sit on. And the CEO had reached out to me to catch up. And I was getting a great sense of his context. And his context is really hard. They're, creating business, crisis plans. They're trying to figure out, and it's a complex organization. They're trying to sort out, what to do to take care of employees. They're trying to sort out, he hasn't even had time to think about how this is going to impact the numbers yet. He's starting to think about that, but this business continuity planning is taking up so much of their time. So my sense is the struggle for a lot of C-level executives which is the group I tend to coach, is where do I find the time? I've got these other things that I've got going on. And yet the other paradox of it is that, we had this beautiful conversation and I got a real great sense of what was happening with him and really was able to express my gratitude to him because he's doing such a fantastic job, being empathetic, taking care of first things first. And you know what? It made a huge difference in him hearing that gratitude and kind of back to the psychological safety piece. So I would say that there is this paradox that most C-level clients, I think, are dealing with, which is I don't have time, and then I really do need good advice, and I need to have a safe place to vent because there's so much that I can't do and be in front of the people that I work with.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, guys, thank you so much. This has been, I think, extremely valuable. I hope our audience got a ton from it. And we're going to continue these conversations on through the next couple of weeks. But thank you all on the panel for being part today.
Thank you, Rhett.
For organizing this.
Thank you.
Bye.
You guys have a good day out there. Thank you for joining us on this special edition of the Power Lunch and what we're calling the Quarantine Conversations. And please stay safe, stay healthy, and take care of your loved ones, and actually enjoy this time with your family and make that important too. Not just the business, but cherish the loved ones that you're around. And have a great rest of your day, and good luck figuring it all out. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Rhett. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.